My grandpa Rick Stein was a hard-working farmer. My whole life, he worked on the Rick Stein Ranch and he raised livestock. Now, if there's one thing I remember about my grandpa, is each day before he'd go out for a hard day's worth of work, he had his coffee. Now, I've tried to carry on the tradition. My grandpa died about 15 years ago, but I've carried on the tradition of hot coffee and farming. If you don't believe me, here are some pictures. Okay, well, maybe that was Mike's farm that I was at, but I am a busy farmer. I've got cows, sheep, ducks, rabbits, and about 40 pigs that all depend on me. I've got crops that need to be planted, watered, and harvested, from corn to cranberries, from pumpkins to plums. Now, I knew you wouldn't believe me, so I brought some pictures of this as well. Now, there's my house and my horse right there, and my name on the farm is Turnip Tim. Here's some pictures of my crops. It's fall season, so it's all fall crops. And then over there is some of my livestock. Now, I stole Reagan's chicken name for my chicken, and I named one Chakira. And then I stole one of Dana's names for a duck, so I named one Duck Norris. Now, I named some cows Eric, Brian, and Tyler, which happen to be the names of my brothers, but I promise it's all coincidence. Now, life on the farm, it's hard. You've got some good days, and you have some bad days. Now, my bad days when I play a video game, or if my battery dies and my charger's nowhere close. But my grandpa's generation, they lived through some really tough times. My grandpa was 10 years old when the Dust Bowl started in the 1930s, and it lasted for almost a decade until he was about 20. Now, they called this decade the Dirty 30s, and they did because they had severe dust storms sweep throughout all the farmlands. From Texas to Nebraska, high winds and choking dust would sweep through, killing livestock and crops. It was so bad they would call these black blizzards. Now, by 1934, 35 million cultivated acres had become useless for farming. That's just 4 years into the Dust Bowl. Now, another 125 million acres, this is almost 3/4 the size of Texas, was losing all of its topsoil. Now, on top of that, if you thought that was bad, the dust would work its way through the cracks of even well-insulated homes, leaving dust on food, on your skin, and all over the furniture. It was so bad that there was a massive migration. They called this the Okie migration. And some 2.5 million people, they left the Dust Bowl states, from Texas to Nebraska to Oklahoma. Now, if you ever heard of John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath, this was written in 1939, and it was just about a family that did just that. They left their farm because they couldn't farm there, and they left it in the Great Okie Migration. Now, farming is hard on a good day, but during the Dust Bowl, almost impossible. Now, we can forget, living in our current difficult situations, how much worse other people have had it in the past. And it's during tough times like these that we're met with this immovable truth. Paul tells it to us in 1 Thessalonians 5:18. He tells us to give thanks in all circumstances. That is, in good circumstances, we give thanks. In bad circumstances, we give thanks. If you have a bumper crop, you give thanks. When your crop is destroyed by the dust, you still give thanks. Now, you give thanks for one, because life could always be worse. There was once a farmer, and he had his wife, his 6 kids, and his mother all living in a small hut with him. And it was so crowded and noisy that he often fought with his wife and he fought with his children. The winters were cold, the nights were long, and life was hard. And he thought, my life couldn't possibly be worse. So he goes to the town elder and he says, what do I do? It is also noisy and we're always fighting. My life couldn't possibly be worse. What do I do? The town elder thought for a little bit and he said, well, do you have a chicken, a rooster, and a duck? He said, of course I do. I'm a farmer. He said, okay, go home and take the chicken, the rooster, and the duck inside to live with you in the hut. So the next morning he does just that. He takes the chicken, the rooster, and the duck inside the hut with him. And he finds that life is worse than before. With the quarreling and the crying, there was honking and crowing and clucking. And on top of that, when he would drink his soup, there would be feathers in it from the ducks. So the farmer was even more displeased. And so he goes to the town elder again. He says, what do I do? He says, my life is worse than it was before. The town elder thinks. He says, do you have a goat? He says, of course I've got a goat. I'm a farmer. He says, take the goat inside to live in the hut with you. So he takes that goat and he puts it in the hut with him. And the next morning he learns that life is even worse than it was before. In addition to the honking and the crowing and the clucking, the goat was running and pushing and butting. Now the farmer was even more displeased. So he goes back to the town elder and he says, my life is worse than it has ever been. He says, what do I do? He says, do you have a cow? He says, of course I have a cow. I'm a farmer. He says, take that cow inside the hut with you. So he does just that, and the next morning he finds life was even worse than it was before. The chicken, the rooster, and the duck were honking and crowing and clucking. The goat was butting, and the cow wouldn't stop mooing. The farmer was even more displeased. So he goes back to the town elder. He says, this is worse than a nightmare. What am I to do? The town elder says, go home, take the animals all out of your hut. So the farmer does just that. He takes out the chicken, the rooster, the duck, the goat, and the cow. And that night when he slept the sweetest sleep he had slept in weeks. There was no honking, no crowing, no clucking, no butting, and no mooing. So he goes back to the town elder. He says, elder, you have made my life so sweet for me. He says, with just my family in the hut, it's so quiet, it's so roomy, it's so peaceful. What a blessing. What a blessing indeed. You know, one way we can be thankful in all circumstances, like Paul says, is to realize that life could always be worse. Now, it could be better. We can all imagine situations in life which our life could be better. But it could also be worse. There's no guarantee that your life has to be good as it is right now. Think about farming. We've got a lot of farmers in our church. You may have had a tough year, but you didn't have it as bad as they did in the Dust Bowl. Or for those who had to farm during the Dust Bowl, it only lasted 10 years. It could have lasted 20 years or 30 years. You can think about your life. Think about your family, your health, your relationships, your work, your house. It could always be worse. Let's take just finances. Say your savings is dwindled all the way down to your last $100. Well, you could be $1,000 in debt instead of $100 in the bank. Or if you're $1,000 in debt, you could be $10,000 or $100,000. Or what about, a lot of us watch the news, and we're looking at inflation. It's at 6% right now. This is the highest it's been since 1990. Now, I was born in 91, and so that's 30 years ago, so that'd be 31 years. My whole lifetime, inflation has never been this high. But it could be at 12%, or it could be even higher. In fact, it could be like it was in Russia in 1918, during the Bolshevik Revolution. In 1918, 1 pound got you 45 rubles, where 1 year later, 1 pound, it got you 400 rubles. And then what you could buy with 45 rubles, the next year you could buy with 400, the next year would take 6,000 rubles. 2 years after that took 1.6 million rubles. The year after that, just in a 5-year span, it went from costing 45 rubles to 5 trillion rubles. At that point, you were better off burning your money for heat than spending it on Amazon during Black Friday. Listen, life can always be worse. So we're thankful for what we do have. But even if life couldn't be worse, even if you were at the absolute lowest of lows, we still thank God. Psalm 100 gives us reason that we thank God even if our circumstances are indeed the worst. Psalm 100 says, enter his gates with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and bless his name. Then he tells us why. Before he tells us the what, give thanks to him. Now he tells us the why. He says, for the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness extends to all generations. Our thankfulness isn't dependent upon our circumstances. So if you can't thank God about your family or your finances or your friends, you can thank him that he is good, that his steadfast love endures forever, and that he's faithful to all generations. So in any and every situation, we give thanks to God. Now, Paul, who tells us to give thanks to God in all circumstances, he practiced what he preached. He was good at this himself. Philippians 4:11 through 13 says, I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, of abundance and need, and I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Listen, if Paul can give thanks to God while being beaten and imprisoned and shipwrecked, then we can certainly give thanks to God in whatever circumstance we face. Some of us need to learn to give thanks to God when times are bad. But some of us need to learn to give thanks to God when times are good. Specifically, when times are good because we worked hard for life to be good. The farmer is a hard worker. He gets up at the crack of dawn, he plants his crops, he waters his crops, he tends to his crops. So when the harvest is bountiful, does he not deserve all the credit for the harvest? This is sometimes a debate with doctors. The doctor performs the surgery, the patient recovers, and then the patient thanks God. There was a TV show called House, and Dr. House always got upset with that. He said, how come God gets credit whenever something good happens? After all, was it not the doctor who spent the countless years in medical school, who stayed up late studying countless hours, who labored in the operating room? Isn't he who deserves all the credit? We work hard to get what we've got, so why thank God? It's I who put the extra hours in at work. I studied harder. I sacrificed more than others to get what I got. And I didn't see God lift a single finger. That was the danger of the Israelites. They were about to enter into the promised land. And God warned the Israelites about this thankless, prideful, self-sufficient, I don't need you attitude. He says this in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 11 through 17. He says, take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command to you today. He says, lest when you have eaten and you are full, and you have built good houses and you live in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart will be lifted up, and you'll forget the Lord your God. The Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness, with its fiery serpents and its scorpions and its thirsty ground, where there was no water, who brought you water out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with the manna that your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and test you to do good in the end. He says, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand has gotten me this wealth. He says, you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth. We give thanks to God because our production depends on God's power. Our production depends upon God's power. You did the work, but God gave you the power to do the work, so we thank him. Raymond Brown, who comments on this Deuteronomy passage, he says, self-glorification is a sinister transgression. It takes full credit for all of life's achievements. It forgets that without the breath that God gives, the motivation that he inspires, the intelligence he provides, the strength that he imparts, the perseverance he encourages, none of this would be possible. Just because God worked through you, through ordinary natural means, through your sweat and your blood and your elbow grease, doesn't mean he wasn't involved. The great preacher Charles Spurgeon once wrote, he said, let us not despise the bounty of God, because this great boon comes in a natural way. If every morning when we awoke we saw fresh loaves of bread put in our cupboard, or the morning meal set upon the table before us, we should think it a miracle. But if our God blesses our own exertions and prospers our own toil to the same end, is it not equally as much a ground for praising and blessing his name? Our production depends upon God's power. So no matter our accomplishments, we always thank God. Clement of Alexandria, one of the great early church fathers, he said, since therefore we have everything from God, we ought in everything to give him thanks. So even if life could be better, we thank God. Even if life is good because of your hard work, we thank God. Lastly, we thank God because counting our blessings counters our complaints. Counting our blessings counters our complaints. One of the things I've learned about life is that entitlement engenders ingratitude. We're unthankful because we think life owes us certain things. And when we don't receive it, we're angry and we're bitter because we think, I deserve this. And no, this isn't just us millennial snowflakes. It's all of us. We all, each and every one of us, grow accustomed to our blessings. We've come to expect them and to take them for granted. You know, this morning when I woke up, I didn't really fully appreciate I had a bed to sleep in last night. When I came to work, I had a car to drive in with a radio and AC and heat. I had fresh water that came right out of the tap. I had food for breakfast, and I'll have it for lunch and for dinner. I had a phone that I could text my family and my friends for Thanksgiving. You know, I'm very blessed for my phone, and yet I find myself complaining about my iPhone when it takes more than about 10 seconds to connect to my AirPods or my HomePod Mini. I mean, talk about first world problems. We grow too accustomed to our blessings. Warren Wiersbe writes, he says, one of the evidences that we've grown accustomed to our blessings is the spirit of criticism and complaining. Instead of thanking God for what we have, we complain about it and tell him that we wish we had something else. He says, you can be sure that if God did give us what we asked for, we'd eventually complain about that too. The person who's gotten accustomed to his blessings can never be satisfied. If you don't thank God now, you won't thank God later. You know, one of the things we often do to God is we keep moving the goalposts on him. For many of you, you now have a house. And you can think before you had a house and you thought, man, it would be great to get out of this apartment, get a house of our own. We can work on it, we can spread out, we can each have a room for our separate things. And then when you move into the house, what do? Well, the water heater's broken, you got to fix that. The roof is leaking, you got to fix that. And you find yourself complaining about all the things that are wrong with the house, instead of thanking God for that house he got you in the first place. For many of you with your family, you think, man, once I get a family, a wife, a kids, things will be great. But then you find yourself complaining about your wife or your husband or your kids. For many students that are in college, at some point they're thinking, man, if I can land that job, it'll be great. I'll have enough money, I'll have some prestige, I'll have something to do what I love. But then when you land the job, what do? Well, you complain about the workload and the stress and your coworkers and the politics that come with the new position, right? You know, I think parents can do this too. Sometimes parents can wish for that next stage in their child's life. And instead of enjoying that short, sweet, precious phase that they're in, they can always wish for that next phase. My mom had this poem up on her wall all of my growing up. And here's a picture of it. It says, cleaning and scrubbing can wait till tomorrow. For babies grow up, we've learned to our sorrow. So quiet down cobwebs and dust go to sleep. I'm rocking my baby and babies don't keep. We have been blessed with homes, food, family, work, and countless other things. So let us not develop an attitude of entitlement, but an attitude of gratitude. So let's counter our complaints by counting our blessings. You know, that phrase, of course, is very popular in the hymn, To Count Your Blessings, which says, when upon life billows you are tempted tossed, when you're discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings and name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. You know, one of my many blessings is being able to work with all the great kids here at First Church. And a few weeks ago, I asked them to say in the video, tell us what they're thankful for, to count their blessings. Now, the video is pretty cute, so I'll show it to you. Here's what the kids said.
My family, my mom, my dad, my family, and my home.
For God and Jesus.
Pets, family, at home, electronics.
I'm thankful for my mama. I'm thankful for Jesus and God and this church.
I'm grateful for Jurassic World, dinosaurs, the Mosasaurus, raptors, Indoraptor, and my family, life, God, and everything on the earth. My gaming systems.
My family. My kitty. Toys. Family.
My Nintendo Switch. And my little sister. Turkey. Corn. Vegetable. My family.
And my mommy and my daddy.
My 2 bird dogs.
I'm thankful for my parents and my grandma, for my sister. driving me to school every day.
Bringing me into this world, taking me to football,
Taking me to cheerleading and gymnastics.
how good cooks they are.
My bed, the food that they cook for me. My food and the toys and everything else. Me being born.
Taking care of me, giving me food, giving me shelter, taking me places.
So far that they gave me life.
The work that they give us, so they help me put on my shin guards and my shoes.
Washing my clothes.
Doing dishes, washing clothes.
Loving me. For life.
For giving us a good world to live in.
For always being with me. For making the earth. And for making me.
A life and trees so we can breathe air. Saving us from the cross.
Animals. For keeping me safe.
Everything.
For creating me. Giving us our daily bread. Giving me my family. And letting me have a house, maybe.
All the living animals. For protecting us and giving us food. Built this planet, built us.
I thank them for my parents and my health and my food.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye.
We have so much to be thankful for. So let's counter our complaining by counting our blessings. So let me ask you, we're past Thanksgiving, but what are you thankful for? I encourage you from this Sunday until next Sunday, write down 3 things each day that you're thankful for. And I encourage you to do it today. Do it right now, otherwise you'll put it off and it'll never get done. Now, if you don't know even where to start, I'll give you one for today. You can be thankful that Timmy's done preaching and that next week you've got Johnny back to preach for you. Hey, listen, we can't control our circumstances, but we can control our thankfulness. So let us, as 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, give thanks in all circumstances. Would you pray with me? Dear God, we are so thankful for all the many blessings that you give us. God, I pray that we can never take for granted your many blessings, but instead we can always thank you for what you've provided for us. But most importantly than all, God, we can thank you that you are good, that your steadfast love endures forever, and that you're faithful to all generations. God, we love you, and it's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. See y'all next week.